All right, folks, we are back. So we are going to be going into this next part. The next part has to deal with putting the code together for this new program. So as you see, I won't recap. You can check out the previous video as far as the UI. So I'm just going to shoot over into my blocks right now because I'll try to minimize the time of this video. So with this one, what we're going to do is we're going to build our binary search algorithm. And as you saw with the previous, on the design side, there's a couple numbers that I'm going to have to deal with first. So in order to do that, I'm going to need to create some variables here. So I'm going to go and click on my initialize global. And what I'm just going to do quickly is I'm going to duplicate this 4 times because there's 4 global variables that I need to account for. So the first one, we're going to change the name to number guesses. All right, and again, this is going to, as we saw within this first, this is down here, which is going to correspond to label number guesses. That's going to tell us how many guesses we took. The next one we need to figure out is the spread of the numbers. You know, where is the range of the numbers? Where are we starting from? So in this case, we'll start at 0 as the very first number. And then correspondingly, what we're going to have for here is the max, which is the maximum number. And what I'll do is I'll do it a little bit more than just 0 and 100. We'll do this as 0 and 1,000. So we'll make the value a little bit larger. And then the last one here is we're going to make labeled guess. All right, and so this is the number that the computer is going to be guessing, or the algorithm, I say, which corresponds to this number right up here, label guess. All right, so that is the first piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of do this little, rather than having to put all the same lines of code within this process, I'm going to build a procedure. But before I do that, the first thing I want to do is I want to go to my screen, and I want to grab a screen1.initialize. And the reason why I'm using this is because, as you can see over here, initially, my first guess is set to 0. And, well, depending on what I set for this value here, which I'm hard coding as 1,000, well, the first guess should be set to be 500. But I want to keep it at 0, and I want to kind of dynamically add it together, you know, within my code. I want to have my code do that, not just me just to set this value here of guess to 500 and just kind of go from there. Because eventually, if I want to change this so that rather than hard coding this to 1,000, I want to change this to some sort of user input, which will be assigned to a variable, then I'm going to need code in here in order to find that midpoint, because that midpoint of 500 might not be 500 forever. All right, so in order to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my variable. I'm going to grab my set function here. All right, what I want to do is I want to set the variable guess. I want to set what is going to be that first random guess. Well, rather than, again, like I said, hard coding it to 500, because I could see 0 and 1,000 here, I'm going to create a math function to do that for me. All right, so I'm going to go over here to math. Let me grab my addition block here. And I'm also going to need a divisor block. And the reason being is because of what I want to do is I want to set up an average of, in this case, of 2 numbers. So I'm going to actually take this addition block and I'm going to plug it into this divisor block that I plugged into this variable here. All right, and then you'll see why when all is said and done. So again, I'm going to go into my math. I'm going to grab the 0. Let me plug it in here. And let me change this 0 to a number 2. And then what I want to do is I want to add both the minimum and maximum values together. So I'm just going to mouse over this and click on the get global min and plug it in here. And then the same thing for max, get global max, and plug it in over here. So as you can see with the code, what's going to happen is that first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the 2 values that are stored up here in global min and global max, 0 and 1,000, and add them together, which gives me 1,000. We're then going to take that 1,000, we're going to divide it by number 2, which should give us 500, and then it's going to return that value 500 and store it as get global guess. Now, like I said earlier, in the future, if I wanted to change this so that it's not hard-coded as 1,000, but it's a value n that any user can input, you know, meaning that if I put a text box over here saying choose your own, you know, or input your own, your range of guesses, choose a number between 0 and 10 or 0 and 1,000,000 or whatever the case may be, we could then set that value in there, and then that value will change the max number, which means that the guess value here will automatically change along with it because we set it up that way within our code. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a procedure. All right, and the purpose of the procedure is so that I don't repeat the same code over and over again. And this procedure, the purpose of it is going to it's basically going to be the binary search algorithm, putting the code together so that we are, finding the half of the half of the half regarding the search algorithm, the numbers. And then, like I said, there's multiple ways that we can create binary searches. For the point of this game, this is basically how we're going to do it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to, again, go to variables, and we're going to go to set. And what we want to do, because ultimately we're changing our guess, our global guess. We want to make sure that we're constantly updating the value that we are guessing what the target number should be. All right, and so what I want to do is I want to set up a mathematical equation that's going to allow me to take a range and then find like the variation and ultimately find what the target number, or what the new guess number I should say should be located at. And so in order to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my math block here, and I'm going to grab my subtraction block and plug that in. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab my divisor block, and I'm going to plug it into the second input here. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab another subtraction block, and I'm going to plug it into this very first input here. And let me input everything first, and then I'll explain the methodology of this. So it's going to look very similar to what we have up here. All right, we're going to have the number 2. So I'm just going to duplicate that and place it down here. And then what I'm always doing is I'm always taking the max value, and then I'm subtracting that by the minimum value, because I want to find, what is the spread between the current minimum and the current maximum, and divide that by 2 so I get that midpoint. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the maximum value, and I'm going to subtract the new midpoint from that to give me what the new guess value should be. And that would be the middle of that new range of midpoint. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mouse over global max and get global max, plug it into this first input right here. And then I'm going to mouse over global min, click on get global min, plug it here. And then again, what I need is another global max in the front here, so I'm just going to mouse over that, click on get global max, and substitute it into there. And then that is the bulk piece of that algorithm. That's going to allow us to always guess that middle of that midpoint. What I also need to do is I need to update a couple things. So we have label guess over here, so I need to update this and display the new number. I also need to update the label down here showing the new the guess value of where we're at. All right, so and I also have to create a counter that's going to increase that counter every single time I click on too high or too low. It's going to always increase the guess count. So I'm going to go on the left-hand side over here, click on label guess, and I want to set the text of that. So I want to grab this set label guess.text and plug it into the bottom here. And then what I want to do is I want to set that to this value that's being stored into this global guess over here from all the math that I was doing over here. So I'm just going to mouse over over here and get global guess, and I'm going to plug that into that input right there. The next thing, like I said, I want to increment the counter of the number of guesses. So I can just mouse over number of guesses and grab the set over here, set global number of guesses, plug that in. And I want to create a counter. So whenever I do a counter, I use an addition block. So let me grab that. And then what I want to do is I want to mouse over number of guesses and grab the get feature, plug it into the first input. And then I'll just duplicate one of these numbers here, plug it into the second, and then I want to change that 0 to a 1. Right, so that will increase my number of guesses by 1 every single time I click a high or a low button. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to change the text to that number of guesses, because we're setting the value to the number of guesses here. We now need to change that value. So I'm going to go to label number guesses. And the same thing, I want to click on the set label.text and plug that in. And what do I want to set that to? Well, I want to set it to the value that's being stored within this number guesses. So if I mouse over that and grab this get feature, plug it in, and there we go. All right, so that's the bulk of the binary searching algorithm that we need to create. So the last thing that we should need to do is connect the buttons, and then make the notifier pop up when we click the correct button. So I need to work on those 3 buttons right there. So the first thing we're going to do, it doesn't matter which order we do. I'll just start with button low, since it's the top button over here. And again, whenever I click the button, I want things to fire off. And so what do I want to do? Well, what I want is I want to change the label on top here. Instead of saying my guess is, I want it to say, I guess too low if I click the low button. So I want to change the text on that. I also want to set the global minimum value to the value that's being stored in global guess from up here, +1, so that it basically chooses the next value up and chops off or forgets the rest of the lower half of the list. And then what I want to do is I want to call this procedure so that all this math happens and all the labels get updated, so we find the new midpoint and we continue on with trying to figure out what the target number should be. All right, so I'll go over here on the left-hand side. Let me go to label intro, and I want to grab the set label intro text. That's going to be the first piece. All right, and then what I want to do is I want to change the text, like I said. Instead of my guess is, I'm now going to change the text to, CGV. I guessed to low. And that'll change that heading. So then we're going to change the global minimum because we're clicking the too low button. So we want to bring that minimum value up. So I'm going to click on this and choose global min. And then I need to take the global min value and add 1 to it. So I'm going to go to my math block and grab the addition. And then I want to duplicate this. And then I want to get the value of my global guess. So let me go back up to here, mouse over this, and grab this get global guess and plug that into that input. So whatever value that the current value of global guess is, I'm going to add 1 to it, set it to my global min. So when I come back in here and start doing all the computation, when I call this procedure, it's going to get the new value that I'm looking for. And so with that being said, I'm going to go over here to procedure. Actually, and I should probably have done this too, so I apologize for not doing that sooner. I'm going to change the procedure name to guess, only to kind of keep it more formal. Keeping it as just procedures is too generic. So what I'm going to do now is go under my procedures here and grab the call function for call guess, and I'm going to plug that into my button low here. All right? And that is all the code that I would need for that. My global or my button high is really the same exact code. The only thing that I'm doing differently is rather than adding 1, I'm subtracting 1 from the global guess count. All right, so what I'm going to do to shorthand this and make it quicker is I'm just going to, I'm going to right click on the event handler, button low.click, and I'm going to just duplicate. And all I need to do now is I need to click on the drop downs and change. So I want to do button high. So I'm going to click on that. I'm still adjusting the same label intro. I'm still setting the same global min, the same global guess, the same call. Everything's the same. The only thing I need to do is swap this out for a minus block. So I can do this one of 2 ways. I can actually keep this the same and change this to a -1, which would work the same. Or I could, I grabbed the wrong one. Or I can be official and I can, do it the correct way, or the legitimate way, and by using the minus block instead and just swapping out the values. But again, if you use the positive one with a -1, positive block with a -1, it'd still work the same. All right, and then the last thing I would have to do is obviously switch out. So instead of global min, I would have to change that to global max because I want to shorten that maximum ceiling down to that middle point, -1, of course. All right, so the last block that I need to worry about putting together now is that button win. All right, so when I find the target, what do we do? All right, so this is just a nice and easy one. So all I want to do is I want to call the alert that I have in here, the notifier, and I want to grab this show alert down here and plug that in. And then what I want to do is I'm just going to add a notice. So I'm going to do it a little differently. I'm going to grab a join block and plug the join block in here because I want to join a couple things together. And I want to add one more input here. So I'm going to click on the blue mutator, string, and then add it in here. So I have 3 inputs. And so what I'm going to do, or my train of thought, is I'm going to have a string here. And I'm just going to duplicate this to create a second one. I'm going to plug that into the bottom here. And so in this top one, I am going to type out I only needed with a space. All right, and then what I want here in the middle is the number of guesses that was needed in order to find the target number. So that's this global number guesses right here. So I'm just going to duplicate this variable here, and I'm going to plug this one into this middle block here. And then in the bottom, I'm just going to type, I'm going to type out the word, oops, yeah, get down here. I'm going to type in the word guesses to find your number. And actually what I should do too is in the beginning here, right before guesses, I'm going to put a space. So that will account for the space, because when you join things, it's just going to smush things together. And if you don't put spaces in there, it's going to not look that good. So as you can see here, this is going to join all this in one string. So it's going to, in the notifier, pop-up's going to pop up, and it's going to say, I only needed the number 7 guesses to find your number. All right, and so that should basically be it when we look at, all the code over here. So let me see, get it all on one screen. All right, that is all the code that we need in order to get this thing to work. So let's just give this a quick test, and we can conclude the video. And give me a second. Let me open up App Inventor. All right, so I'm going to go to Connect, AI Companion. All right, I'm on my phone, scanning. And let me get to my camera here. All right, so there's our program. All right, so we got our number of, my guess is on top, the current number. Oops. And so, oh, you know what? I think I missed something because that number should have started. Go back to my code really quick. Oh, yeah. So what I missed is my initialize function. I totally forgot to put in the to update that banner up top. So this is correct up here, but I need to add just that one additional piece, which is that label guess. So let me go back into label guess here, and let me go to label guess.text, and let me plug that into the bottom here. Ooh, let me reset the connection quick. Once I put this in there, it should actually take care of everything that we need. And what I want to do is I want to set this text to this global guess value here. So I'm going to go over here, click on get global guess, and then plug that in. So once I initialize, because I start at 0 and I go up to 1,000, it's going to go and do all the math for me here. 0 plus 1,000 divided by 2 gives me 500. It's going to plug the number 500 in here, and it should update that label to show now 500. And it should do that automatically when I start my program. All right, so now let's give this a shot. Let's go to Connect, AI Companion. I'm going to scan it on my end. And let me switch over to my camera. And as you can see now, it works as it intended because I updated the label. So I'm going to guess, say, the number 321. So 500 is too high. So I'm going to hit that. And, oh, there we go. It's another thing I forgot to do. So sometimes in coding, when you're trying to fly through things, you notice things. And because we're using values that are now decimals, what I forgot to do in my procedure here is I forgot to put a round function on this. I know I mentioned that in the notes earlier, and I totally forgot to do that. So that's my mistake. I apologize. So I'm just going to add a round feature in here. Let me reset my connection. So that will take care of rounding, so we don't have the decimal, so we should only be dealing with whole numbers now. And that's the only place that we need that. So without further ado, hopefully I fixed all the errors that I needed to. But that's the nice thing about computer coding too, is that as you test your program all the time, you find things where you're like, oh wait, totally forgot to do this, totally forgot to do that, and then you can kind of fix and edit along the way when you need to. All right, so let's try it again. So again, I'm going to use the number 321. So I have the, again, starting at 500. 321 at 500 is obviously too high. So I hit too high, it goes down to the halfway point, which is 250. Well, 250 is now too low. So I hit too low, and we jump up to 375. As you can see, the counter of the guesses is also going as well. 375 too high, because again, I want to get to 321. 313 is too low. 344 is too high. 329 is too high. 321 is the correct. And then in the bottom, I only needed 6 guesses to find your number. All right, and it put everything in that notifier just fine. All right, so that's basically how our search algorithm works for binary search. And again, it's all based off of using that methodology of finding that midpoint and going from there. And again, remember that this is only really beneficial when we have an ordered list. If we do not have an ordered list, it's better to be using other search algorithms, putting that together in order to find the data, the information that you're looking for. All right, so we'll cap the video here. I'll get everything posted for everybody, and we'll go from there. So that being said, we obviously will not have class Thursday because of Thanksgiving, so I wish everybody a happy and safe Thanksgiving. Enjoy time with your loved ones, and we will catch you next week with a new video on Tuesday. All right, take care, everybody. Stay safe. Be well. Take care.